I was speaking at a rally recently, and people were around us doing protesty things, chanting, singing, all that stuff. And a guy drove by and he heckled the crowd. He rolled down the window and he shouted, "Get a job!" My friend Julia looked at her watch, looked around at everybody and said, "It's Saturday?" Of course, it wouldn't matter when it happened, right? It wouldn't have mattered if it was during the work week, because get a job has been the battle cry of the protest heckler for thousands of years. In fact, we can trace it all the way back to the book of Exodus. Hi, I'm Dave Barnhart, and I'm one of those preachers your preacher probably warned you about. So we've already established that Pharaoh is a racist authoritarian leader, and that one of his strategies is to try to keep people so busy with work that they can't protest. The author says that the Egyptians harassed the Israelites with hard work. And later on, Moses and Aaron show up and they start organizing the Israelite leaders to confront Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says to them, "Moses and Aaron, why are you making the people slack off from their work? Do the hard work yourselves." Later on, he doubles down on his strategy. He keeps the same quota of bricks that he will require from them, but he refuses to provide them with straw so they can get the job done. Then he says about the protesters, they are weak and lazy. That's why they say, "Let us go and offer sacrifices to our God." And when they object, listen to what Pharaoh says. "You are lazy bums, nothing but lazy bums. Go and get back to work." 3 times Pharaoh calls them lazy. And the author is relishing the irony, because here you have Pharaoh, who has never done a hard day of work in his life, who inherited all of his wealth from his daddy, and he's tooling down the Nile in his yacht, telling the Hebrew slaves, you guys are lazy. And in so many ways, we're in this same situation today. Look, unless you're in prison, you're probably not in literal slavery. I get it. But for the last 50 years, the ruling class has whittled away at our time. They've captured almost all of the wealth gains, while the rest of us are working the gig economy without benefits, with no time off even to bear children. Billionaires and their enablers talk about money we've paid into the system as entitlements, while they believe they're entitled to all of the wealth on God's planet. And here's the crazy thing. I mean, if you shout, "Get a job" at somebody, you're making several assumptions, right? First of all, you're assuming that someone doesn't have a job, and maybe that's why they're poor. Secondly, you're assuming that they don't want a job, that they're too lazy to go look for work. So there are all these assumptions that we make to blame other people for their problems, when the Bible is very clear that Pharaoh is the one that's responsible. I mean, Pharaoh holds all the cards. He's the one manipulating the work environment to make these people work harder. He's putting them in a situation of desperation because that way they will be easier to control. And if you have the audacity to voice your objection, you know what the ruling class will call you: lazy. From generation to generation, from ancient times until now, the heckling is the same. Because protesters are often young, they get saddled with stereotypes of being unemployed or spoiled students. At most of the rallies and protests I've been to, the crowd is diverse in age and race and faith and background. We've got plenty of retired folks and business owners in the mix, but to the hecklers, all protesters look the same. Now, Pharaoh's goal is also to divide and conquer the resistance. See, not all of the Israelites want a confrontation. In fact, when a confrontation arises, they blame Moses and Aaron. They don't blame Pharaoh. Listen to what they say. "May the Lord look on you and judge you. You have made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us." Today we call this internalized oppression. The idea is that some people who are in the oppressed group actually feel like they can benefit from the system. If we'll all just work within the system, Pharaoh will take care of us. Later on, after they escape from slavery, the Israelites are in the desert and they have a hard time finding food. And what they do is they blame Moses and Aaron again. They say, "At least when we were in slavery, we could eat our fill of food." See, this division is not an accident. It's by design. Now, modern Christians often forget that a big chunk of the Bible was written by people who understood themselves as freed slaves. When the Israelites finally received the 10 Commandments, one of the first laws they had was this: everyone, from the richest to the poorest, gets a day off. Everybody is entitled to a Sabbath. And the message of the Sabbath is that life is about more than work. You don't have to earn a day off. A day off is your birthright. Which also means there's a corollary, right? I mean, if everyone deserves a day off, then you have to pay your employees enough to take a day off. That's also part of the biblical mandate. Now, the authors of the Bible also believed in hard work, but they were very skeptical about a theology of deserving. So one of their laws was actually that every 50 years they canceled all debts and redistributed the wealth. Ooh, there's a scary phrase. Pharaoh's strategy is the same today as it's always been. Pharaoh doesn't want you to have a day off. Because if you had a day off, you might have time to talk with other people. You might start sharing your frustrations. You might start getting ideas. You might start to organize. But the message of the Bible is also this. If your leaders are afraid of you having a Sabbath, maybe it's time for you to get new leaders.